What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Rolling Stoned. My name is Owen Adams.
And I'm 𝓡𝓸𝓵𝓵𝓲𝓵.
So today we got an article about Christian rock radio stations. Apparently Christian music is taking over. The Educational Media Foundation is the country's fastest growing radio chain, and it's exploiting federal loopholes to buy up local radio stations and take the devil's music off the air.
Okay, so this story starts off talking about a radio station from Boston, Massachusetts that started in 1970 called WAAF. It recently got shut down because it was bought out by EMF.
It says here, in the days leading up to the end, the mood at WAAF was somewhere between hospice care and a rowdy Irish Catholic wake. So this was the last day at their radio station here.
This was like a big rock and roll station that had been around, like, Aerosmith was on there, Godsmack was on there. Apparently, they were one of the stations that really pushed Shinedown in their early days. So they're really noted as being like a heavy hitter and a fan favorite to locals.
When they were on the verge of being shut down here, their last program, they said they wanted to inject as much Satanism in the airwaves as possible before they flipped the switch. The DJs faded out the mics and closed the studio door. And they sat there with their headphones on and cried. Oh.
How sad.
Yeah, so sad. Well, maybe if they weren't devil worshippers, maybe Jesus would have kept their station going.
Well, apparently Jesus is taking over their station.
Yes. So what is EMF doing? They're taking over all of the radio stations here. They're playing the generic sounds of contemporary Christian music, or CCM. It's a genre that everybody pretty much says it's between the absolute worst and doctrinally unsound.
Personally, this music is nails on a chalkboard.
Right, so the thing about CCM is it's not that it's like bad, quote unquote. It's just sterile, right? It's
bland.
It's so perfect and just everything's mixed. And the lyrics are just, like, gone over 100 times with a fine-tooth comb. Just very neutral. Just very, like, Wonder Bread,
Which is very appealing to a lot of families.
Right. So there was a whole thing back in the day about how people and conservative parents and Christians were kind of against rock music back in the day. They thought it was, the devil's music, and, the segregationists, of course, were against rock and roll because it was supposed to be supporting race mixing and all that kind of stuff. But over the years, the Christian music has become just sort of this general, all-encompassing, just sort of like standard music, all right? In the CCM industry, that recognizable sound has been a science. You just can't be too heavy, says Grace Semler-Baldridge, an independent Christian artist who performs as Semler, and who has topped both the iTunes Christian albums and song charts. So there's the just right spot when it comes to beats per minute. Not too fast.
That's a term that we're very familiar with. You and I are, for sure.
Right. So it's just the right spot with your BPM. It's not too fast, not too slow. I've noticed, because I've played a lot of this kind of music, it's somewhere between maybe 95 and like 120 or so.
Now, this lady knows something we don't, because she brings up another term that I'm not familiar with.
After BPMs, there are JPMs, or Jesuses per minute.
That's the part of our formula we've been missing.
Right. That's what we need. That's what we need to make this work. This article kind of makes me want to come out as a Christian artist. There's no hard and fast rule on the required number of JPMs, but, the more the better.
Throw in a hymn, a God, a father, not a daddy.
Maybe not daddy. Daddy's not quite...
That one doesn't work.
Not quite the same level of majesty. Choruses should be rife with repetition so listeners can sing along by the second round. Okay, so this is an aspect of pop music in general. This is not just Christian music. The guitar must be warm, but just a bit bright, with a touch of drive and a long tail reverb that hangs on the air. And I've heard the CCM radio sound compared to the Edge and the kind of early 90s sort of alternative rock sound. And they've kind of just been recycling that same just 90s alternative rock sound just with, very Jesus-y lyrics on top of it.
I have heard it many times.
Yeah. Oh, and they say it right here. There's the delay, which doubles the guitar slow strums. A technique that Reverb.com's The Gear, Tones, and Techniques of Modern Worship Guitar says was pulled directly from U2's The Edge. There it is right there. So,
Which a guitar player that I absolutely cannot stand on his own.
well, I like the little, sparkly delay sound. Yeah, that little delay sound. The
All right.
delay sound is kind of cool, but look, anything in moderation. When you overuse it and it's in every single frigging...
Well, it's his identity.
I guess. Many right-wing Christian culture bearers have long believed in the Breitbart doctrine, the idea that to change politics, you must first change culture. The Breitbart doctrine is, of course, politics is downstream from culture. So, the idea that political movements don't just happen in a vacuum, but they, of course, originate from something in the culture.
What they're basically saying is they're trying to keep all of their statements outwardly apolitical while simultaneously acting as an agent of a political machine.
So kind of sneaky, right? Kind of sneaky.
Just a little.
They're definitely catering to this right-wing kind of traditionalist demographic.
Well, that's not people's only beef with them, because as it's also saying here, it is also the story of the near demise of local radio, which is a big thing for, local artists, new music, all that kind of stuff. And, the voice of political opinions in your local community. And they're losing it to the hands of an organization that doesn't even pay taxes. And they claim to be a nonprofit organization, but the way that they operate is much grander than that. More so like a corporation.
Yes. So here we have, at big commercial stations and small beloved community radio stations alike, they've offered the owners an undeniable sum of money, wiped out the local presence, and replaced it with unmanned transmitters. Almost every new EMF station operates as a repeater with no local voices, few local jobs, and barely any overhead. So the repeater is basically copy-pasting the same set of music and the same programming schedule to multiple dozens and dozens and dozens of stations all around the country, and all they need to run it is a computer system. So there's no overhead. They're not spending a whole lot of money to keep these systems going. However, they are making tons and tons of money because their viewers just keep donating to them. I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of the collection plate in a church, right?
Yeah.
Just give tithe 10%.
Or any televangelist who calls asking you for money.
Yeah, it's here, tithe 10% of your income to this huge radio conglomerate, because they really need the money to keep fighting Jesus's fight for him.
And hey, we're just trying to keep the lights on, guys.
Yeah, sure you are. They compare EMF to National Public Radio, NPR.
The numbers difference is staggering.
Yeah, so NPR assets of $150 million. Meanwhile, the EMF CEO is making $770,000 a year, and that's just his singular salary here. 97 cents of every dollar the organization makes comes directly from listeners' pockets. The on-air hosts repeatedly hound their sometimes hard-up listeners for money, often several times an hour. So, yeah, they're taking tons of donations, and the non-profit EMF is an unassuming money-making machine. If that's not an oxymoron, I don't know what is. I mean, I must be a moron if that's not an oxymoron. So let's talk more about these loopholes here. We have tons of loopholes from the FCC. And these loopholes were initially placed there to help small nonprofits. Okay? So they're trying to help small nonprofits to try and keep the broadcast spectrum from falling to those with the deepest pockets. Obviously, the capitalist system that we find ourselves in, the more money you have, you can kind of buy your influence, and you can kind of take over smaller companies that are not competing.
But the FCC wanted to keep it relatively fair for some of the smaller guys.
Yes, which is important, again, because you mentioned the local community involvement in the radio. That's a big deal. But now we have this nonprofit that has grown to such a ridiculous size, yet they're still taking advantage of the 501c3 loopholes. So it says being a nonprofit has paid off for us many, many times.
Man,
Yet another oxymoron from this moron, Bob Anthony Fogel here. Fogel, of course, is the guy that initially came up with this idea of the Educational Media Foundation. And they started from humble beginnings, and that you can read this article and you can check out all of the backstory about this wonderful, loving Christian station. And we have, of course, Jesus here jamming out to his ghetto blaster there. So just tons and tons of these like college stations and stuff are getting eaten up. Fogel embraced the attitude that Christian music should meet people where they're at, even if that means playing increasingly vapid, quasi-religious music. No Christianese remained a guiding principle.
No cussing, but like some of the newer Christian rock bands that are out there, unassuming would be a great word to describe some of these groups, because you're not going to hear them mention Christ. You're not going to hear them mention Jesus. Like they're not going to be using the like concrete terms for all of. It's a lot of metaphor. It's a lot of euphemism.
I see. Okay, yeah.
And it's a lot, but it's got that creed, that God smacky sound. A lot of it does.
So that's what the no Christianese, because it's like, again, it's this sneaky, like underhanded thing where it's like we're Christian, but we're not like those like Christianese Christians. We're the cool Christians kind of thing, right?
That's the one thing that I will say about things like gangsta rap and hardcore metal and all of these other like violent, aggressive. They're in your face about it. They're very they're very upfront about what they're saying.
We talked about the very generic, sterilized sound. We talked about the lack of politics, even though the EMF staff have donated primarily to conservative PACs. We talked about the FCC loopholes here. There's a major anti-LGBTQ problem. We have a queer Christian who was trying to get her song Faith onto the iTunes Christian chart, but they never gave her the time of day. It's just so blatant, their exclusion of LGBTQ people. I think this is just important because you musicians out there, need to be aware of this kind of slant towards Christianity and this kind of slant towards traditionalism and conservatism. I think this is indicative of a cultural pendulum swinging, and we got to talk about this stuff because we don't want the pendulum to swing too far back into the 1950s, people arguing that music is going to make your child evil and corrupt their mind and all of that. Like, this has been proven time and time again. I mean, you can go back to the court cases with Frank Zappa on freedom of speech and the parental advisory label and all of that. But what do you guys think? Let us know your opinion on CCM music in the comment section down below. Are you a fan of CCM? Is it just a good, relaxing, easy listening style of music to you? And, you don't really care about the political angle or the FCC loophole angle. Let us know what you think down below. Also, don't forget to share this video. Share it with all of the Christian music fans that you know. Share it with all the Christian musicians that you know, all of the gospel musicians.
Also, share it with your local disgruntled radio hosts.
Yeah, right. Share it with the college radio station hosts that are probably looking at their last year of employment here. And, let's definitely spread the message, spread the word about this impending disaster of Christian music. Also, hit that like button if you're feeling our threads, if you're feeling the Rolling Stone format, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of all of our future episodes of this and OC podcast and whatever else the future may bring for this show here. That's a little bit about Christian radio. This has been Rolling Stoned.
And we are signing out.